Have you downloaded the resources for practical session 4? Do you? Practical session 4 doesn't have any assessment, right? Doesn't have anything that we need you to ensure you know. Actually, the assessment is a form of knowledge. It's not an assessment as though it's an assessment that you have to search for it. You have to look for it. It's not an assignment, right? The assessment is to ensure that you know the skill that we are going to, we have taught you in the lab. How are you going to deploy that when you go out to work? Don't mistaken the assessment is to evaluate, right? To evaluate something that is beyond the laboratory, right? It's not assignment. Assignment is beyond the course. We ask you to do additional things. That's why you need to look for it. But this type of assessment is for you to understand. I hope all of you by now you should have realized, right? Most of the things Dr. Lau tell you how to do it, and we want you to have the first hands-on on how to complete it. So that next time when your boss asks you to do something about, do you know something about security? Have you implemented it? You would answer it yes, because you have done it, right? You have completed it, right? So we found that information security is actually a very big part of your career in the future. So that is why the assessment is just to provide marks for you to actually deploy it. It's something like other people say a free mark to all, right? But definitely the free mark doesn't come with no effort. Learning needs effort, right? So let's start, right? For the lab 4, we don't have any assessment because we feel that in Datacom you already learn much about the configuration, right? Already learned much. This is a form of additional information that you can receive when you are doing when you are trying to provide services through the internet. Now, as I mentioned before in the previous lab, right? We have completed 4 labs. The first lab session is about encryption. Encryption is about user to user. User to user, very simple. The second lab, with user to user, you want to have a secure communication that other people would find it hard to generally understand. Of course, if they want to have details, then they would put a lot of effort. Rather, you send an email without encryption, you can send an email with encryption so that other people put more effort into decoding it. Not that it's impossible to decrypt it. It's not impossible, but it takes more effort. So they would rather look for other things to do it. And the second part is we teach you how to secure your own system. If you have your own unique system, how you ensure your permission, right? And how to ensure you have a secure connection to another computer, which is your SSH, right? How to ensure your permission in your, how to create folder with your Unix system, right? And then the third lab, we did, in the third lab, we did the, own system protection. I would say it's own system protection. If you take a look, right, you have your VNC, you have your sandboxy, you have your keylogger, right? So this is your own system protection, right? This is your own system protection, right? So how are you going to protect against external? That is our third lab motivation, right? Because if you receive some email which you think it's a virus, so you open it in Sandboxy. If you think you are in a situation whereby you cannot ensure you have total secure PC because you borrowed somebody's PC, so how are you going to ensure your password will not be copied, right? So to ensure all these things, we teach you how to protect yourself against external attack, I would say. Now in this lab, right, in the lab 4, we actually teach you how to secure your own network. You know, in the data communication, we studied the ACL, right, access control list, and then we have the VLAN, right? We have many things to ensure we have a secure department communication, secure company communication. Now, in this section also, we are going to refresh back. It's nothing new. It's just something that we've refreshed back to create awareness for students. When they create their own network, they can actually create a very safe network other than a very open network, right? So if you take a look at today, right? Today's lab is configuring Telnet, how to ensure your Telnet is safe. We have done that in, I think, Datacom Lab 1, right? Or Lab 2. We provide a password-based Telnet into the router. SSH, the new thing would be about syslog. Syslog is a system log, right? System log is important because system log means that somebody has entered the system and make changes to the system. So this system log is a way to detect who has entered at what time and what did he or she do. Right? This syslog is very important. When you grow in your career, you will find that this type of logging will ensure that you know the system, how and when it is being accessed by whom, right? So if you want to trace back, it's much easier. You do not say, hey, I have so many employees, I don't know who have access to whatever resources I have. Sorry, I cannot help you. But company is going down because all the data is lost. You cannot know who is the person who make the problem. When you are the system manager, you will start to freak out, right? Because you have to answer for your customer, because your company data actually is your customer data, right? You start to have to pay for a lot of lawsuit, right? So securing your system is a way to ensure your customer and you will have a good relationship, will trust you. If you have an unsecure system, you deploy the system good, wow. For example, right, timing wise, you deploy a system, right? Very happy. Oh, I sold the system. After 2 days, the buyer come back, the seller come back, and they say, hey, your system down already. Don't know why the server. Then I say, oh, the server got hacked already, and all your invoices, all your orders is gone. Then, but the client already pay. Who pay? Who haven't pay? How are you going to answer that? So all these will come into usage, right? All these will come into usage. User to user encryption, permission for own system protection, protect against external. Maybe because one of the company employee download some PDF file with some virus and the system is down, you know. So all these things is very important for you to consider, right, when you deploy your system. Now then, right, let's go for today. Today we do not have any marks awarding, or we do not want you to have any hand in, right? It's solely for refresh purposes, right? Now you have a file called lab04 packet, right, from the web which you download. After you download, you realize that you have your lab4 kit, right? Your lab4 kit, you will notice you have your lab4 there. You can open it, right? Open using the packet tracer software, right? Now for me, I would say packet tracer, right? So I will open my packet tracer. And then I will open the file. Right. I have this file exactly the same as this, right? Now, following the instruction, the first one is to set up the local area network, which means if you look at this, how many network are there? How many network are there? How many broadcast network are there? Koo Heng Chun. How many broadcast network are there? Eng Mun Xiong Xun, right? Chiang Xue Feng. One, how to sue, right? For me, it's very simple, right? There are a total of how many network? Very simple, right? For those who cannot answer, right, please do some revision, right? Because it's important for you to understand. Now, for example, this is the network. If you take a look, right? So when we have router and a PC, a router directly connect to a PC is a crossover cable. So this is one network, which means this is a gateway, right? So when a router connects to a PC is crossover cable, then we have another gateway, right? Now this is a switch. A switch means it's a local network. So a switch connects to a router doesn't mean this is one. Doesn't mean this is one, right? Sorry, doesn't mean this is one broadcast network. It's wrong, right? Because it's a switch. A switch means it is a local. It is a layer 2. So which means that everything that connect to the switch until the router, we will say this is one broadcast network, right? And then we have the router to the direct to the server, which is the end device. We use crossover cable, right? To the switch, we always use a straight cable, right? So now we have this switch here, this connectivity here, which means every part of it is accessing to external network, right? So you have the 1 network, 2 network, 3 network, right? So and then you have the 4th network. So yeah, Koo Heng Chun is correct, right? So you have 4 network here. Now then we need to set up. The setup is quite simple. The PC IP, we set up the laptop IP and the server IP, right? PC IP, laptop IP, server IP, all is .1. And then if you take a look at this, the gateway is 1.254, 2.254, and 3.254. So initially, we go back here, we input we go to the desktop IP configuration 192.168.2.1, 192. 192.168.2.254, right? So we just input all the end devices, right? I hope you still remember. If you don't remember, never mind, follow what I'm doing. Right? And then the server. Server, always remember, server always is a static IP, right? 192.168.3.1, 168.3.254, right? So you input all the end devices. As I mentioned, if you attend my class before in Datacom, right, always have a standard configuration step. For example, right, what I mean by standard configuration, for example, the first one, I configure end devices first. Then I configure my router interface, right? Then I configure other things. For example, then I configure my router interfaces, right? For example, and then usually the third one is configure routing, and then maybe you configure your other services, right? For me, it's important you maintain the steps so that you are not leaving some devices not configured, right? It's important to have a standard configuration step, right? So that you are aware what you should do, and you will not miss any devices not configured. For example, your boss throw you this network, or if your step doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow Dr. Lau's step, not necessary. For example, some people like to do this. For example, some people, my students, sometimes they like to do this. I want to configure this network first. Then I configure this network. Oh, sorry. For example, I want to configure this network first. Then I want to configure this network. Then I want to configure this network. Then I want to configure this network. Never mind. It's also can. The most important thing is have your own standard configuration step. If your standard configuration step is configure all N devices first, then configure the router interface. By all means, go ahead. Right? Switch doesn't need to configure because there are no VLANs, right? So whatever it is, you must have your own. Comfortable, I would say comfortable standard configuration step. Not necessary to follow who, but your own, right? Your own way, right? If you don't have any way, you can follow the way that we teach you, right? It's also okay. So then, if you take a look at the building your own network, right? After the router R2, which is this one is .2. I think this is .1 and .3. Right? This is .254. Okay. So this is .2. This is .1. This is .3. This is .254. This is .254 also. This is .254 also, right? And this network is 192.168.1.8.2.0, right? 192.168.1.0. Okay, my dot line is not working well. So this is 192.168.3.0, and this is 200. Zero also not working well. 200.0.0.0, right? So you just replace the n number, right? The n number with the number at the dot, right? So which means that if we come back to the configuration here, right? Because now it's not exam time, for me, you can use the config or the CLI to configure, whichever is also okay. Let's do the config configuration, so it's much easier. If you take a look R1, right? R1, right? If you take a look at R1 here, right? We have the 254 for F00, right? Make it switch on 192.168.1.254, right? Subnet mask, I don't care, right? And then the 2, switch it on 200.0.0.1, I don't care, right? So which means this interface here, this router interface is configured, right? Then we go to the second router interface. We go to config again. Then 0, 0, 0, 0. 0, 0, we switch on 192.168.2.254 and switch it on 192.168, 200.0.0.2, right? Okay. right? That would be your R2. Then your R3, right? Your config, your R3, F01 is switch on. This one is 200.0.0.3, and this is 00 is 192.168.3.254. Okay, and switch on. Right. So you have everything done, right? So following the instruction here, right? Following the instruction here, you have your interface, right? Clear? I hope you follow this one, right? Your FA01, FA00, FA01, FA00, FA01, FA00. Now, in case, student, in case your packet tracer doesn't give you the FA01, FA00, you go to options and go to preference. You select this always show label port. Make sure it's tick. Make sure it's tick. So then you can see the interface. So if you have this network here, assuming this is your company and this is your company resources, right? For example, one of the end device is your customer. So your customer can access your computer and can access the server, for example. Can it? Of course, you can try, right? You go to a laptop, you go to command prompt, and then you ping 192.168.3.1. See, you want to ping the server, right? 3.1 is the server. So can you access the server? You should be able to, right? Right, you should be able to, right? And then you're worried because you got 2 timeout. But it makes sense because this is the first time you connect to the device, and so the device take time for the ARQ and the layer 2, a lot of layer 2 commands to work through the network, right? So and also PC0, can I access my customer? Of course, right? Let's ping the customer, ping 192.168, assuming laptop 0 is the customer, 2.1, right? So you should be able to ping the customer also. You should be able to connect to the customer also. Right? No problem. Right? And try a few times, you will see that it's no problem and it's quite fast, the speed also, to connect to the customer. So overall, you can also try to ping the server to check if the server is operating with the your PC, so that you can configure, right? No problem, right? So this network is complete. Okay, this network is complete. So section 1 is complete, right? The task 1 is complete. Any problem with task 1? Ong Kwan Ning, Lok Jun Leong, any problem with task 1? So can we go to task 2? Xia Bingqian, can we go to task 2? Tarani, have you completed? Can I go to task 2? Okay, so let's go to task 2. Now, task 2, if you take a look, is to configure router to log messages. Now, this is an important task. Now, why? If you take a look at your network here, most of the threats or the external forces that are not good, or the external packets that uh, wants to hack into your system, they deliver through your router, because router is a gateway. You see the gateway. Why do we call it a gateway? The gateway is the most weakest point that you have in your network. If you don't have an internet, your company data will not be leaked outside unless somebody copy the data go out, which is a human issue and it's not computer security anymore. Right? Now, we are not going to talk about human issue. We are going to talk about network. So a gateway is a problem, right? So now, but if we notice when we configure the router, right? When we configure the router, if you take a look just now when you configure the router, even though you are using the configs, right? Even though you are using the config to configure, if you look at your CLI, right, it's actually doing a logging in. You see, you are going to go to config and then no shutdown and then input IP address and then exit no shutdown. Actually, you are inputting the command here, just that we are using the shortcut instead going to the config here and input, right? So in actual, if we have a router, we cannot use the GUI like what we did just now. But because we are not in a we don't want you to have a problem in Lisa, what is the command line for this? What is the command line for this? I think all of you already give back Dr. Ang already. Already give back avocado. What is the command line? So in order to prevent that, right, I will just use the config, right? So that you don't need to remember what is the command line for the configuration. Right? I think especially IAIB student, by the end of your third year, you already all give back to avocado the datacom. So in order to refresh back, right? If you take a look, when you need to configure, you actually go to the privilege mode, right? Go through the privilege mode and to the configuration mode. The configuration mode will make changes to the router. If somebody wants to change your router configuration, they need to go to configuration mode. If they want to make a changes to the interface of this router interface, they need to go to configuration mode and then interface of the configuration, right? That's why config if. That's why you put configure terminal. After that, you go to the interface. So all in all, when you want to make changes to your router to enable the incoming and outgoing packets, you actually go to configuration mode. Not only user mode, not only privilege mode, but configuration mode, right? So which means that configuration mode, you need to protect it. And who has accessed it at what time, you need a logging system. That is why we teach you the syslog server. A syslog server will log the configuration, who has access at what time, right? For example, you want to log who has access to R1 and R2 during what time with a timestamp service for logging. Now, how to enable your syslog server to record down who has access to which router and when did you access it, right? So this, you need to enable it in the config config mode command. If you enable it and you enable the logging for both of the router, R1, right, and R2, right, you will be able to identify, right, who has logged into the router, right, for example. Right, so let's see, right, if you have a service time. Now, why we want to log, right? Now, you see, you are logging it service time stamp and log date time in millisecond. Okay. Now, the first thing you need to do is to enable the syslog server, right, in the server. Now you have one server here, you double click the server, you go to services, you will see a syslog server, right? The syslog server must be switched on, right? So, and I think this lab got a lot of things already taken out, right? Anyway, the syslog server is for logging message from other network nodes. Your task is to configure the router to send message to syslog server. So the syslog server IP is 192.168.3.1, right? Because just now, as you see, just now I go to the server here, I enable my syslog, right? I enable my syslog. Right? So after I enable my syslog, right, I can actually log the logging of R1 and R2 inside the syslog server, right? Let's say I enable. Once this command is typed inside the R1, that means who wants to access R1, the access will be logged into the 192.168.3.1, which is your server, which is where the syslog server is. Right, now what my intention is to configure R1 router and R2 router to have a logging, right, to have a logging, and the logging will save in the syslog server that is in the IP address 192.168.3.1, right? So if you go to your CLI, this one you cannot use your config, your GUI, right? So you have to put your enable, and then you have to put config T, right? So that you can go to configuration mode. Again, a revision, right? How to go to configuration mode. You have to do the enable, and then configure T, right? So these two commands. This is okay. Don't know why. Wait, now they are okay. Come, let's go back to some revision, right? We have 4 types of mode, right? We have user mode, we have privilege mode, and then we have a configuration mode, and then we have an interface mode. User mode, privilege mode, right? So these are all type of mode there is. Right. Now, in order for you, right, to go from user mode to privilege mode, right, privilege mode to configuration mode to interface mode, right, and to return back, you have a few commands, right? For you to return back, you need your exit, right? Same, you can put exit. Same, you can put exit. From user mode to privilege mode, you have a command called enable. From privilege mode to configuration mode, you have your command called config T, right? Which is configure terminal. From configuration mode to interface mode, you can put a INT, right? Interface, right? An example of this, right? You have your config T. An example of interface mode, you need to inform, right? In the command line, what interface is it? For example, interface FA01 or 00, right? So this is example. Config terminal, there's no other choice, just config terminal. Enable is just enable. I hope this is clear, some revision, right? So when we come back here, when we want to go to config mode, right? When we want to config mode, okay, again, user mode is indicated by the sign here, right? This is a user mode indication, right? And this is a privilege mode indication. Configuration mode indication is, for example, if you take a look at this, right? If you take a look at this, you will have your R1 here, right? And then you have your R1, let's say your router. And in the configuration mode, you still have your R1, but you have your config and then this one. When you have interface, you have your R1, you have your config interface, right? You take a look, right? You have your config here and your config interface or config if. Okay. Interface, right? So you have your R1 config if. Okay. So you can write the full word interface, no problem. But usually you can also write the short form interface int, right? And if you take a look, configure terminal, you can also write configure terminal, but you can also write config T, right? So this is how you know what kind of mode you are in. If you see this kind of design, you will see you are in user mode, you're in privilege mode, you're in configuration mode, you're in configuration interface mode, right? I hope this is clear. And so we go back to configure our R1, right? We have already do enable config T, right? And if we take a look at the lab, is service, we need to log the service timestamps, log date time, millisecond, right? Service timestamps, log date time, milliseconds. Then we want to do the logging in 192.168.3.1, which is our server S0, right? So this is R1, and then we go to R2, right? Same. This is my user mode, and so I will go to enable, right? And then I go to config T, and then I do service timestamps log date time log date time millisecond, right? And my logging is 192.168.3.1. So now I have done my logging, right? Now I have done my logging. So I hope you have done your logging, right? So please use the different mode to ensure you are accessing different mode. Verify logging configuration using the show logging iOS command, right? For example, you can show logging, right? Then you say syslog logging enable, right? Syslog logging enable. Okay. So no log message can be generated on the server by executing commands on the routers. For example, entering and exiting global configuration mode will generate an informational configuration message, right? So log message can be generated on the server by executing commands on the router. For example, if you want to enter and exit the global configuration mode. For example, now you already complete the logging, right? Logging. So if you want to show logging, right? You see, logging is enabled, right? So you can now log message, right? So now, how can I log a message? Let's close both command, right? And if you try to see, right, at the moment, the syslog has already a log, right? At what time you actually log into the router, right? Because it already do the logging for you, right? You see the logging information, right? Because just now what I did is I exit from the configuration mode, right? So, and I enter the configuration mode and I exit the configuration mode. So that's why it's doing a logging, which means this one is 200.002. 002 is this one, and 001 is this one, right? So I already completed. The first time I logging in is when I do the logging. You see just now the command, when I do this service timestamp log date time millisecond, I already log in, and then I do another logging, right? And then I exit from this system. So I do 2 times. For example, if now I clear the log, right? Now I clear the log. Now what I did is, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to access R1 router, right? I'm going to access R1 router. I'm going to I'm going to do config T, right? If I exit, I'm in the user mode, it will not log, because user mode is not a mode where you can make changes to the router, right? So that's why if you look at your logging, it will not be logged. So unless you are in the configuration mode, then it will be logged. For example, if I go config T, right, it will be logged. Once I exit from the config T, you see, it will be logged. The action will automatically log in the syslog server, because I go to the configuration mode. Once I touch the configuration mode, it will ensure that there is a log inside. That's why here, log message can be generated by executing commands on the router. For example, entering and exiting global configuration mode, right? When we are in a user mode, it will not log. When we are in the global configuration mode, we will be logged. Why? Because we are making changes to the router. We enter the configuration mode. This is a very important mode to be protected, right? So we finish until step 3. Any problem? Any problem? If no problem, we go to step 4, right? Now, step 4 is, if you look at the network here, right, we have the network here. And what we want is set up a firewall at server 0 to receive only logging message from R2. Now, if we take a look, sometimes we do not want the message from outsider. Assuming this laptop is an outsider, is a customer, right? Customer router, we do not want to keep track who has what access to it. Maybe they want to access the server by creating a log there, but we don't want. So what we want is set up a firewall at server 0 to receive logging message from R2 only. To receive message from R2 only, which means that R2. Oh, now what we want is to only monitor the outside router, because this is internal, assuming PC 0 is yourself just now, as I mentioned, and server 0 is your server. So I do not want, for example, it's not do not need, you need actually, but maybe you do not want. You do not want to monitor your own router who has access. You only want to monitor R2 logging messages. You can set up the firewall, but usually we don't do like this. We monitor all the router, but this is, for example, a situation whereby your company boss asks you to do. I will not ask you to do like this, right? But then if there is a choice, you actually can. You can set up from the desktop tab of the server, a firewall is there, right? Switch the firewall on and then configure the following. For example, you have the firewall here. You go to the desktop here, and then you will see your firewall IPv4, and then you configure the firewall, right? Action is allowed. Protocol is UDP. Remote IP is 200.0.0.2, and wildcard, you leave it. Wildcard, you leave it to. And then local port is 514. Remote port, leave blank, and then you add, right? Once you add this one, you will realize that from now on, you can only, at server 0, can only receive logging message from R2. If you make any changes to R1, like just now I make some changes, right? If I go to config T, if I exit, right, there won't be any syslog message here. Sorry. Services. Sorry, I didn't switch on yet, right? So for example, now if I go to config T, right, and I exit, right, if I go to my syslog server, I won't be able to log any already, because it's already protected from the by the firewall, right? Now if I make a changes to here, right, if I go config key, and I exit the configuration, you will see that my syslog right, my syslog will be logged to the 02, right? Okay. So you can use your firewall to prohibit some logging, right? And you can actually log any of the router by typing in this one and where you want to log the syslog, where you want to log the system logging in information. Okay. So make sure you click the add button and observe the right. So that would be the task 2. Any problem with the task 2? I hope it's clear, right? How come I've got so many students? Li Lian Jun, Lim Kang Ji, is it clear? Task 2. Right? Just now I asked who? Li Lian Jun, Lian Jun Li, or Lim Kang Ji. Okay. So then, as I mentioned just now, right? Our third one is to ensure our own network is protected, right? So how we protect just now? We use the syslog, right? We use the syslog server. We can use firewall even to protect the network, right? From even logging messages we can protect. But then, how are we going to prevent, for example, some IP services, or how are we going to impose some configuration permission, I would say. Now, router configuration, if you take a look, by default, when we say configure T, when we say enable, the default permission is provided. The default permission is provided. And usually the default permission is the highest. But sometimes, if you are a network administrator, you want to lower some privilege, right? You want to lower some privilege. This is when we talk about privileges. Privileges in configuration. Now, privilege 15 is the highest, which means that is why you are given a configuration. You are given the utmost level to configure anything you want. Sometimes you can lower the privilege. For example, if you are the network manager, or you manage the IT department, then you will give yourself any devices or any routers or any switch that you have, you give yourself privilege 15, so that when the employer leaves, when the employee leaves, or when your subordinate leaves, you can delete their username, so that they will not be able to make your network or your IT department some not good elements, right? So usually you can create a new user. For example, here you can create a user, right? How you create a user? If you take a look at here, right? if you take a look at here, right, we are doing a second part. You can create new user when you have new staff joining your company. For example, you can create username Tan Ming Wai, right? And I give Tan Ming Wai privilege. This is a Cisco. It's not proper English. Privilege, for example, 5. Password is Ming Wai. For example, password Ming Wai. For example, password is password Ming Wai. For example, I can create Jun Leong, right? I can create a username Log Jun Leong, right? Privilege 6, because he's a higher one level, because I asked him to manage a network. Maybe I give him privilege 10. Password is password Leong, for example. I can create a lot of password and username, right? So username, what privilege and what password. What is a username, what privilege, what password. Now the key point here is this: do not have a common username. Do not have a common username. For example, Utahnet privilege 15, password Telnet password. If everybody also know only this, then it's not a good way to manage your network devices. Always, when a new employee join, make a username for him. What kind of privilege you want to put? What kind of default password he wants. He can go back and log in and then change the password, no problem, right? So a default password, a reasonable amount of privilege based on his job description, and his own username. This is a key point in managing your own network device, right? Never share a common password. For example, imagine all your email password is the same. Just go Utah student ID, password is Telnet Pass. Then you can use your friend's password to access your friend's resources. That is not right, right? So every username should be given a reasonable amount of privilege, depends on the job scope. Maybe Tan Ming Wai say, hey, I feel very sad, I got privilege 5. But then your job scope is not to manage the network. Your job scope is as a programmer, then it's okay. So I don't want much privilege because I don't want to be responsible if something is happened, right? Clear? So depends on the privilege. You can give up to 15. Lowest is 1, right? You usually don't give privilege 0 lah. If privilege 0, what for you want to give privilege? What for you want to give the username? It's not even make sense, right? So you can configure your, this time we are using a common one, but do not follow this. Always, every user must have their own privilege, own username, and own password. I hope this is clear. Student, are you clear? Everyone must have own privilege, own password, and own username. Okay? This is an example in the lab only. Hey, suddenly click. So if you take a look, so I configure now. I configure some privilege in R1. It didn't ask me to delete. never mind. So never mind. So R1 username Utahnet privilege 15 password telnet pass R1. So I go to R1. All right. If you see this is config mode. Config mode, I have to go to enable config T. Right, this is config mode. Username Utahnet privilege privilege 15 password telnet pass. Right. So then I configure my privilege already, right? And the second step is to configure the incoming VTY lines on R1. I think we have done this before, right? Now we want to configure VTY lines. Why VTY lines is to enable, for example, Telnet and SSH, right? So we can configure Telnet and SSH using the VTY line. So when we configure line VTY 0 to 4, now this command here, just to refresh, right? Just to refresh, right? This is the second one. Okay, this one I move it here. So let's go to here. Now line VTY 0 to 4. Now this command here actually gives you how many, why 0 to 4? If my line VTY is 0 to 1, what does it mean? If my line VTY 0, 1, which means I can at one time 2 computer to log in because 0 and 1. If I 0 to 4, which means at one time I can have 5 computer to log in, right? The more line VTY 0607, the more computer is able to log in. That's why sometimes you can put line VTY 02, no problem. It's not error, right? It's just how you limit your telnet service. So log in local transport input telnet. This is a standard configuration. For example, if you want to transport input, you want to do other services, you can put SSH. You can put 03, no problem, right? This is can input. This is can input. The rest is fixed. The rest is fixed. This is fixed. This is fixed. This is fixed. Right? That's why you can see your telnet and then your SSH. Right? You can change the services, but not you can change how many at one time can log in. What is the services, but you cannot do other things. Okay. So that would be the command for uh, uh, allowing telnet to go. That means now you allow telnet services in R1. So if go back to R1, allow my, sorry, going to allow my telnet services line E104 local telnet, right? So once put line here, you see that it's going to be line configuration mode. Line configuration. So you can connect one internet program. If you see your network program here, R1, which means your PC0 can go and access to route R1 using that. Now you can open desktop. Sorry, just now my network is down, right? Is it okay? Task, okay? Task 3, okay? Hoi Yin, Ing Man Xuan is okay? Task 3, right? You just input in R1, you just enable the telnet, you enable the username and password, and you can actually log in from your PC0 to your router, right? Okay. Khu Heng Chun. Okay. Ong Kwan Ning. Task 3, is it okay? Timing wise? Now, task 3 and task 4 is quite similar, right? Student, can you hear me or are you sleeping? Xia Bing Qian, task 3 already completed. Now, again, task 3 and task 4 is quite similar, right? So as I mentioned just now, right, you have your line VTY 0 to 4, 0 to 4, which means that you have 5 users. Login local, transport input, line VTY, all these is standard configuration. You can only change maybe 04 to 0 to 1. You can maybe change telnet to SSH, right? And you can change your username by providing each user, right, the newcomer or new staff, when they join, you make sure you provide them each with their own username and password, the default password. They can change later, right? Clear? Don't use a common one. The R2 to support the SSH connection, which is okay, right? Just now we configure the telnet, now we configure the SSH. Now when we configure the SSH, we want to do a IP domain name, right? So that we want to have a domain now. How to configure a domain name, for example. For example, now we go to R2, right? Same, enable config key, right? And then you have your IP domain name utahsecurity.com, right? So you have your domain name. Now the domain name is to ensure that your encryption has enough sufficient randomness if you configure randomness. So for example, now you can configure a username, but this is a common username which I don't suggest you lah. Privilege 15 secret SSH pass, right? Now there's a difference between the password and secret. Now sometimes password and secret is I think you know, right? In Datacom, password and secret. If you use a password when you go to show your running config, right? You can always see back the password. For example, now you use a secret SSH, right? So if you exceed and you go to your privilege mode and put show run, you can see that right, your password here. You see your Utah username is Utah SSH, your privilege is 15, and the secret is encrypted. But in R1, if you are in R1 and you see your running configuration, right? Just now I put password. Your password, right, will be able to see. You will be able to see the password of UtahNet in your configuration. So usually you can decide whether you want this to be put a password or this to be put a secret. Because password and secret, the difference is the secret you will not be able to get back if you forget. The password you can still see. Hey, last time I put a password. The secret, I don't know. If you forget, that means I have to do another username for you because I do not know how to retrieve back the password from here. Definitely not, right? So many keys. So it's easier for me to create another username for you, right? So the password and secret, you have to decide. For example, you can decide, right? If you put user, sorry, I don't want to put red color for name. For example, user name, right? Ingman Xuan. Ingman Xuan. Xuan is how to spell. It's H-U-E-N. Privilege 15. Then secret secret mention. Right? For example, I can put here, right? That means Ingman Xuan, right, have 15 privilege and the password is secret mention. The password, after you store in the configuration in the router, it will not be visible. It will be something like don't know what kind of sign what kind of sign also can appear. If you take a look at the config, right? You take a look here. What sign also can appear. You can use secret or you can use password, no problem. Right. So here we show you to how to use the secret. And then you configure already Utah SSH username, and then you create your VTY, right? You go to config P, you go to line VTY 0 to 4, right? And then login local transport input SSH, right? So now you have your SSH. You can now SSH is like a key, right? So now SSH you have a key. Now in order to ensure the key is generated using your domain name here, right? Using your domain name here. So you have to at first zeroize your RSA key, right? So you have SSH, as we say, the packet is encrypted. The packet is encrypted using a key. So in your config mode, right, you have to put the crypto key 0is RSA, right? So you must make sure there's no existing key first, and then only you generate your crypto key, right? And then you crypto key generate RSA, right? How many bits? 1024, right? So then you can generate, right? No problem. Now, if you show IP SSH, right? Exceed. If you show IP SSH, you will see that your version is currently 1.99 and authentication timeout is 120, and your authentication retries in 3. This is standard. But you can always configure your IP SSH timeout to be 90. Oh, sorry, in the config mode. IP SSH timeout 90. IP SSH authentication retries is 2 times, and IP SSH version is 2. Right? If now you can see your show IP SSH, you can see now from just now the version, and now the version, just now the authentication timeout, and now the authentication timeout. Just now the authentication retries and the authentication retries now is different. Now again, I make a revision. I don't know whether you notice or not. Only in the privilege mode, that means this mode, right? Only in this mode, you can put the command show. For example, you want to show IP SSH. For example, you want to show run. For example, you want to show logging. All these that consists of show, right? That consists of show only can be run in the privilege mode. In the privilege mode, not in the configuration mode. The show mode only in the privilege mode. That's why when Dr. Lau enter, right, it has to exceed the config mode, then only I can show the IP SSH. Okay, I hope this is clear. All the show mode, whether it's show run, show logging, or show IP SSH, is always in the always in the privilege mode. Okay, so now we have completed the task 4, right? The task 4 says you can actually telnet and you can SSH, right? Task 4, you can complete it by having the PC telnet or having the PC SSH. If telnet, you exit, right? Right. So exit. Okay. Right. After you telnet exit already. Okay. So now you can telnet. You telnet to 192.168.2.254. 2.254 is your router 2, right? Router 2, you didn't set your router 2 to telnet. You set your router 2 to SSH. So that's why router 1, you can telnet 192.168.1.254. You can telnet this one, right? But you cannot telnet the other one, right? Utarnet telnet pass, right? It's okay. So you can SSH to 192.168.2.254. You can only SSH to this is router 2, router 2 IP. This is router 2 IP. Router 2 is you didn't set up router 2 with SSH, so that's why you cannot telnet. You can only SSH to router 2, which is your password. Password is SSH pass. SSH pass. Right. So this is your SSH. Now you are in R2. R2. If you can see, I think it's a little bit small to see lah. But if once you do it, you can see your R2. Okay. So that would be all for your task 4. How to set up a remote SSH configuration. Okay. Is okay? Is task 4 okay? Right. Xia Bing Qian, is it okay? Task 4, right? Do it slowly along the way I explained to you, right? Now then you have your task 5. And then task 5, right? Which is your final task. Finally, right? So task 5 is quite simple. Task 5 is dealing with ACL. How to secure access to server. Now, if you're IAIB or CS student, you are mostly programmers, right, or consultant. You need to ensure your server is secure. How to ensure the secure access to the server is very important. Now, you have to just now you already set up firewall for the syslog. Now you set up firewall on server 0 to allow all IP from network disk to enter from the desktop tab of the server, right? To allow all IP from network, right? 192.168.0.0, which means all your local network you allow, right? So how you want to set up this in your server. It's very, very simple, right? So you just go to right, and just now in the desktop you have your firewall, and you can allow protocol key or allow OIP, right? Remote on remote class. One mask first wants to allow OIP from 2100, right? So your mask 00, 00, 255. So and the remote IP is 191.0.0. 555 that you can allow 9268 0 to 5 0 to 5. Okay, you allow two IPs. Right? You can use the ACL to block one specific machine. Right, sorry. Now, if you take a look, I don't know what happened to the internet, right? If you, now is just now I show you how you can secure access to the server, right? So you can allow, go to the server, right? You can allow IP from this IP to this IP, any IP to allow to access. So how you can check, right? You can check your PC 0, you can ping the server, right? You can check the laptop, you can ping the server. So you can set a secure access to the server, no problem. And then you can access control using ACL to block one specific machine. For example, now you want to deny the laptop to access the server. You can put the access list 10 deny host 192.168.2.1, right? And then you deny only this IP, you permit all the rest of the IP. So if you have this written in the R3, now if you put the R3 here, you put the ACL, access control list, which means that you are going to do some prohibition. If you know the access list, right? The access list comes with two type of configuration. If you want to configure ACL, sorry, hello. What is it? Sorry, I have class now. Yeah. Yeah. You can. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I have the headmaster from my school to call me. I Actually, I do a lot of community work, right, for the village school. So the headmaster called me because tomorrow I have I have to learn programming. So anyway, let's move on, right? ACL, come back to ACL. Let's do a refresh on ACL, right? Access control list. ACL stand for access control list, right? Now, if we want to do an access control list, we have two types of ACL, right? If you take a look, the first one we call it a standard ACL, and the second we call it an extended ACL, right? Now, standard ACL is what we see here, right? What we see here is for example, right? This is a standard ACL. This is a standard ACL. Ew. This is a standard ACL, right? This is a standard ACL. Okay. Now, a standard ACL, you have the name here, which you cannot change, and then you can change the rest, right? Standard ACL have 4 parts. The first part is the access list, which is the standard name. You cannot change. The second part is this, the ACL number. Now for standard, the number of here can be 1 to 99, for example. If you see access list 100, 100 automatically goes to extended 100. Right? Clear? Wait, afterwards we will see. Then the third part, as I mentioned, this is the first part, this is the second part. Right? The third part is here, whether you deny or you permit. So this is the third part. The third part. And then the fourth part, it is either, this is the fourth part, either is a range or a host or all. When we want to have all IP, we use any. If we want to have some IP, we put host, something like here. If we want to put a range, we use the wildcard, right? We use a wildcard. So this is standard ACL. So that's why you have the R3 access list 10 deny host. That means I want to deny this host only. Now, as I mentioned, the ACL consists of 2 parts. This is just the first part. The first part is decide whether it's a standard or extended ACL. The second part is whereby you place the ACL in the router. How you place the ACL in the router? For example, you look at your network here, right? You look at your network here. When we say place the router, place the ACL in the router, right? You see the router is here. When you write the ACL, you write it in the configuration mode. When you place the ACL, you place it in the interface. Either the interface of FA01 or the interface of FA00. Right? You place it in the interface. And when you place it in the face, you have to decide whether the traffic is incoming or whether the traffic is outgoing from the interface. Now you see, if FA00 in is same as FA01 out, because this is out. Assuming this is in, this is out. You see the way. This is out, this is out, this is in, this is out. If I want to put in, I will put in. Right? Clear? So place the ACL in the router, you place it in the interface, whether you want the outgoing traffic or incoming traffic. It's very important. How you want to protect, right? So this is just a revision. I think in Datacom, you already know about this. Now, if you take a look, the first part, you decide this one. The second part, you place the ACL in the interface and you place the ACL in, for example. For example, if this command, right? So now this is your interface. This is now in the placing, right? You have these two commands. You see, the first command is your interface, which interface you want to put, and then this is a standard name. This is your ACL number, which refers to here, and whether in or out. If you see FA01 in, that means now I'm selecting this one. I'm selecting input traffic from all these to come to inside here. Okay, clear? If outgoing, it doesn't make sense because outgoing is usually from here, right? Clear? So IP access group 10 in FA interface 01. I hope this configuration you are clear about. The first step and the second step. So now if we take a look at the command, right? We have the access list 10, deny host, right? So we do it in R3. Right? We go to the CLI, right? And then we go into access. Okay. We go to enable config key, and then access list 10, deny host 192.168. What IP I want to deny? 2.1. Right? And then access list 10 permit any. Right? And then I go to interface FA01 IP access group 10 in. Right? So I complete. So now I know when I test my ping from 2.1 to 3.1, 3.1 to 2.1, we know that ACL has already blocked the 2.1 from accessing the 3.1. If you see now, just now, right? If I go to my laptop can ping 3.1, right? If my laptop cannot ping 3.1 anymore. right? Now my laptop cannot ping 3.1 anymore, right? Because of this ACL. Because the ACL say you deny the host 2.1, and 2.1 IP address is the laptop, right? And if you try to ping from PC 0, this PC still can ping, no problem. Okay? So that is the power of ACL, right? And then we delete the ACL. After we delete the ACL, okay? So because we want to implement other things, then we put how to delete the ACL? We nullify it by putting a no in front, IP access group can in, right? Now we nullify the ACL. We can see the laptop can ping again. So how powerful it is. Clear, student? So then we can, as I mentioned, ACL comes in two different formats, right? The standard ACL and the extended. This is a kind of extended ACL. Extended ACL can be 6-part extended ACL. Extended ACL is much longer because it's used to provide or prohibit services, not only hosts or range of hosts or all the hosts, is to deny or permit services. So if you see the access list here, want to deny ICMP, and we know ICMP is actually the ping service. So ACL 100, the moment we write 100, we know that it is extended. Remember just now I said ACL standard maximum is until 99. Once we have 100 above, we are in extended. We are in extended. So extended is to deny or permit services. ICMP is a ping services. So now you can see if I deny, right? If I deny ICMP, then all the ping process should fail. If you remove the ACL, all the ping services will work again, right? This is your 5B, right? 5B. So, for example, in 5B, you can go to R3, right? You can try it out. For example, you can try access list 100, deny ICMP any. Then IP access group 100 in, right? Okay. Oh, sorry, interface FA01, right? IP access group 100 in, right? So after we do this, we can see that the ping services is all shut down. It's all shut down. You can not do a ping service. Now, ping services, normally we shut it down. Why? Because we are afraid of the hacking called ping of death, right? Ping of death actually will make your server inaccessible. It is a threat to your server. So usually we disallow ping services by using this command, ping of death, so that we can prohibit the some weaknesses in your network, right? So if you put no IP access group 100 in, it should go back to normal, right? No, if you put a no IP group access group in, then the ping process should appear back. Right, the ping access should appear back. Similarly, you can use the access control to block other services. For example, we know the port number 80 is for HTTP. We can, when we do HTTP, we are denying TCP services, right? What IP we deny, right? And to what IP, right? So this one, if we put this command, right, the browser server, browse the server from this using the browser should work. Other browsers should not work. Okay. So this is the access control using ACL to block HTTP. And again, to enable the ACL, at first you need to create the ACL. Now, if you see the ACL is above 99, which means this is an extended. Extended, you need to state what service you want to deny, right? And this service you want to deny, you want to put it in which interface and whether it's in or out. Whether in the router, this interface in or out. Then you can also create an ACL to block other services such as FTP services, right? So if you create the FTP services, you realize that all this in front is the same, except the FTP services, you can equivalent it to 21. 21. Just now is 80. Just now is 80. Now is 21. So, and then you apply the 120, you will see that now FTP service is fail. And if you remove the ACL, if you test the FTP, it will work again. Okay, so that would be all for task 5, right? Task 5. 5 has 5A, B, C, D. Now 5A, B, C, D has standard or extended ACL, how you place in the ACL, right? Where is it? Where is the location that you place, whether it's in or it's out. That would be all for the lab for today, right? 5 tasks. Okay, is it okay? Li Lian Jun, Tan Ming Wei. I think task 5 is more like a revision, right? I hope your Datacom is still strong. It's like a short revision for task 5, right? And now, going back to the homework. Homework, usually we ignore it. But homework here has one important thing I want to highlight, right? Now, there are 2 types of firewall. Now, remember, today's task as lab 4, right? You see, you are going to configure own network, right? How to configure, how to secure your network end-to-end devices, how to secure your network by placing an ACL, how to secure your network by providing a password to the newcomer, to the new staff. How do you enable the telnet SSH in the router so that you don't have to go to the router, you can do it outside, right? How to log whatever changes that is made in the router using the syslog server, right? How to enable firewall, right? All this, why you want to enable firewall? Because you want to prevent some assumption that you make, right? Now, there are 2 types of firewall, the stateful firewall and the stateless firewall. Now, the stateful firewall is quite resource consuming, right? We have configured the stateless firewall. Stateless firewall means, right, there are 2 types of firewall, okay? Let me explain this, right? There are 2 types of firewall, which is the stateful firewall and the stateless firewall. Let's see. Now, stateless firewall as what? Why is it called a stateless? Now, if you take a look at this network, if it's called a stateless firewall, that means I don't want to look at how many times the PC 0, laptop 0, server 0 access each other. I don't want. What I configure now is that I have my SSH configured in my router 2. I have my Telnet configured in my router 1. I have my ACL configured in my router 3. I have my syslog configured in the server 0. I don't need to care about how many times. For example, if this laptop 0 access 1,000 times to server 0, I don't care. If the ACL say can access, no problem. 1,000 times, 2,000 times, 3,000 times, I don't care. So this is what we call stateless. I don't care whether there's somebody hacking my server 1,000 times because the ACL say I can access. It's based on ACL. It's based on configuration. That you put in the network. Now, stateful firewall is different. Now, because of this one, because it's just based on ACL configuration in the network, within the network that exists to protect the network, right? So that's why the resources that you use is minimum. You don't have so much, you don't need to process so much. But stateful is different. Stateful, once the router saw a laptop 0, how come access the server 1,000 times? This guy maybe is trying to disable my, maybe he's trying to go to my server, put too many service there, then prevent other people from entering the server to get the services. This laptop 0 look like a hacker like that. A PC 0 how come access to my server and do other things other than what the server does? A PC 0 also have something weird. So stateful firewall observe the whole condition of the firewall. You understand? Observe the whole condition of the firewall. Or observe the whole condition of the network, including those that are configured, that are able to access the service. So this is the reason, right? This is the reason that the resources you use, because you want to collect all this information and then you want to analyze it, the resource is tremendous. Tremendous. Very, very much resource you need. That's why stateful firewall is expensive. Stateless firewall, if it's configured there, it works there, it's fine. Thank you very much. Stateless. I don't need to care whether the laptop 0 access the server for 2,000 times or 10,000 times. I don't care. The ACL say can access means can access. So for security wise, stateful firewall is better than stateless firewall. I hope this is understandable, right? Class, do you understand what is stateless and stateful? Okay, so that would be all for the class for today, right? I hope you can finish the task 1 to task 5. And yeah, I want to give attendance. That's why this guy very anxious for attendance. Attendance week 4, P13. Right. So please scan your attendance, right? And you can have a good early, late breakfast. I wouldn't say early, right? Wait, I have to scan first. Okay, you can scan. Okay, you can scan now. Tarani, you understand the stateless and stateful firewall concept? Usually this one is in the assessment, in the exam. Please make sure you understand. Okay, this is the attendance. If you are done, if you have completed the 5 tasks or you think you want to do it slowly later, also okay, right? I will be here if you have any question, right? But you can leave early if you think you want to have a late breakfast or something. Right? I hope today class, right? We have taught you many, right? To protect your own network. How to protect, whether you want to do a stateless firewall or a stateful firewall. Stateless firewall is what we teach, right, already. How to configure each of the services to ensure each of the services is secure with different privilege, with different passwords, right? Stateful firewall, we will teach only for those who are in communication and networking, because this will require a lot of resources, a lot of software. Okay, usually CN student will be able to do a stateful firewall for their final year project, right? Stateful firewall is automatic. If you have more than 100 ping, you will notify immediately using SMS to the network administrator to say your network is being compromised, for example, right? Stateful firewall is very popular research area, right? Okay, that would be all. Also the scanning. For those who still cannot install Hi, still cannot scan, please write email to me. I can update your attendance, right? I hope today class is pleasant, right? You may have your break, or if you want to stay back, it's also okay. Ask me any question, also okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Right, I see you next week. Next week also, please be on time. Right. Today, I'm sorry. My line was very bad. It was broken 2 times. I hope it is not that unpleasant to you. Right. Thank you for attending today's class, and see you next week. Right. I only put up 1 attendance. Is okay. I put 3 hours for the attendance. Sometimes I will put 2 times, right? But today the class is a bit short. I won't put 2 times.